Hello and welcome in.
Please do not leave your luggage unattended on the station.
Welcome to the show.
Hello, everybody. Welcome in for another episode of Pucks and Prosecco. I'm Meghan Angley. Here's Chloe Theil. And today we have a very special guest again in studio. We're feeling very honored with our guest rotation so far. Colorado Avalanche's very own team reporter, producer, and host, Rachel Tos, joins us today to talk a little bit about her new increased role around the team this year and what it's been like covering the team on a year that's been a little bit of a roller coaster, lots of highs, some low points, but we've been buckled in for the ride this whole time. How are you doing today, Rachel?
I'm great. Thank you all for having me. So excited to be back and have a little girl time here. This is exciting.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jesse.
Sorry, Jesse. I like them better.
No cares, no rules. This is exactly what Pucks and Prosecco is about. So many people enjoy hockey, and it's fun to carve out a little space to just kind of girl out and enjoy hockey and get to talk about it, and also this industry. Being a woman in it, you see things through such a unique lens, and you have a very cool job, Rachel. So
Thanks.
this
It is fun.
very exciting to dive into this with you. All right, I don't know if you wanted to start from the beginning a little bit.
So we went back and forth. We didn't want to kind of give this context because you've been on the show before. We wanted to make it a little different for you, but maybe if you just want to talk a little bit about, you know, how you got into hockey, how you got into this role specifically.
Yeah. So for those that don't know my background, I am from South Louisiana. I went to Louisiana State University. I graduated in 2016, studied broadcast journalism as my major. My minor was sports studies. So knew I wanted to work in sports. I knew I wanted to be a sports reporter. LSU had this really cool setup on campus. It was a student-run TV station of Tiger TV. So that's where I kind of really learned everything. Just kind of got thrown into things and decided like, yeah, this is what I want to do. And, you know, just kind of making a long story short, I worked through Tiger TV while I was in school. I interned at local TV stations in town, which were incredible internships, very hands-on. I'm still friends with a ton of people that like really, really helped me when I was so young and eager. I also interned in New Orleans and then landed my first job in Jackson, Mississippi at a local TV station, fresh out of school. So moved there immediately after graduation because I got the job offer before graduating. And I remember thinking like, what if I fail my exams? What if I just bomb?
No.
And to this day, no one has actually asked to see proof of graduation. I'm just saying.
You know, I think about that sometimes too. It's like, if I put this on my resume, would you really know?
Harvard Law.
Right?
At the time of the job offer, I did not have a college degree. I was on track. I did graduate. Everything was fine. But no one has asked to see it. No one's asked my GPA either. So just saying, that doesn't matter. But I worked there as a weekend sports anchor and reporter, started out as in that role. And then slowly but surely, they kind of chipped away at the sports department as like a lot of local stations do. At the time, we were owned by Gray Television and then eventually we were owned by Raycom and then eventually it became Gray Television. So there were just some changes that they just didn't prioritize sports the way I had hoped to. And so chipped away at that department. We were a 3-person department. I was the last one standing my final year, but eventually made my way into that lead sports anchor role and learned a lot. It was really, really hard for those that aren't super familiar with local news stations, especially in those really small markets like Jackson, Mississippi, although it was still a top 100 market. I mean, small by, you know, some standards, but to me it felt big because I was still covering SEC and SWAC and Conference USA. But you're doing everything yourself. So I was my own video camera operator, my own editor, my own producer, my own writer, my own, like all the things. I mean, Friday nights for a high school football show, I'm like stacking an entire high school football show. I'm driving out to multiple high school football games. I have a video camera with me. I'm shooting everything. I'm editing it myself. I'm trying to manage all this stuff. And then like, I don't know, maybe brush my hair before getting behind the desk, right?
Yeah.
So it was a lot of that for 3 years. That last year was really, really challenging because I did everything by myself. It was like the worst year of my life. It was tough mentally and to just kind of stay in it, but it all worked out. everything was fine. So after my contract, because all these jobs are contract, you
Mhm.
know, and the timelines of it are so difficult, it feels like the stars have to align in order for your next opportunity to like really work out. And so I made the bold decision of not staying, even though they offered me the opportunity to stay, and freelanced for a little while. I was interviewing at different places, just didn't work out. Eventually moved back in with my parents, which was rock bottom. That was really tough, and thought like, oh, maybe I'll go back to school and do something else. Maybe
Mhm.
PR is better. And yeah, Denver was a target market for me all along, and saw the job opportunity with the Avs for the in-arena role. Actually had started out with a different role. I was originally interviewing for something with Altitude TV on the digital media side.
Yeah.
This was right at the time that the disputes with Comcast were beginning.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. So at the time, we were having these conversations about, oh, maybe a digital reporter job. And I was dying to work for a regional sports network. And I was like, I'll do anything, like whatever
Yeah.
it takes to work at an
Yeah.
You can
RSN,
get.
right? And then that kind of crumbled and fell apart. So they're like, oh, we have this like weird Comcast thing. You know, it shouldn't last long.
Shouldn't last long.
But
Oh,
we
no.
can't
Here we
bring
are.
we can't bring anyone on, you know, right now. I'm like, oh, it's a bummer. But of course, because they're all under the Cronky Sports Entertainment umbrella, they suggested the Avalanche job, the in-arena job. And I was like, I mean, I guess like I've covered football, baseball, basketball. I played softball, volleyball. I had an AP top 25 vote in college football. I had a Heisman vote. I have all these other sports,
Yes.
you know, and I was always interested in hockey. I'd watched the Stanley Cup playoffs on TV. I had a friend that was really into it, but
Yeah.
I'm from South Louisiana. You know, it's not something that I grew up doing. I did not grow up playing hockey. I did not grow up watching hockey. And so my boss and whoever else was part of the hiring process just really valued the work ethic. Of course, my reel, right? Like the presence on camera, and the fact that I had done all of the things leading up to it of being a multimedia journalist, of the shooting,
Yeah.
the editing, the producing. I understood all of that. And so that really helped kind of translate into the Abs Insight role that I'm in now for in-arena, because a lot of people don't realize, I've been asked before what my other job is, or like what my full-time job is.
Yeah.
Oh, this is my full-time job. Okay. This is a lot. Because I'm responsible for stacking the show and like creating the content, putting it all together, and like managing the edits,
Yeah.
you know, that kind of stuff. So anyway, definitely feel like you hear the phrase all the time, like, oh, they took a chance on me. They took yeah, they took a chance on me. Okay. And it was really scary, but there was no question was a dumb question. The people I work with are absolutely wonderful.
Good.
And I just, you know, hit the ground running and felt like I don't know anyone in Colorado. And if I fail, you know what? No one will see it that I know of. And then I'll just move. And so from the get-go, I kind of thought this would be a get to Denver, work for the Avs, maybe like 2 seasons, and then get out of there. Either move on to the next bigger and better opportunity. Maybe it was with the Rockies or the Broncos or something I felt a little bit more comfortable with, or
Yeah.
maybe it's just a completely different market, and that's okay too. And then fast forward nearly 6 years later, and I love it. I absolutely love hockey. It's just so funny looking back on how terrified I was to enter the space and how intimidated I was by it. And I can't imagine not working in hockey anymore, because it's just so
Yeah.
fun. I love the pace. I love the environment. I love the culture.
Would you ever
But-
go back?
You know, I always tell people, and I think I may have even mentioned this to Jesse the last time I was here, it's like, never say never. I mean,
Yeah.
if ESPN called me tomorrow and offered me a college football package, sign me up. I do miss covering football a lot.
Yeah.
I miss baseball because I played softball.
Yeah.
But I would never want to work in that schedule. That schedule would be like really, really tough, right, to
Yeah.
manage. But never say never. But I'm really happy in the role that I'm in now and how it's kind of all shaken out.
So you worked with a lot of college athletes, college
Mhm,
football
mhm.
athletes. So it's maybe not the best or most fair comparison, but I've heard different things about how, compared to other pro sports, that the hockey guys are really easy to work with.
Yep.
They're really nice. Is that something that's maybe been an incentive to stick around hockey for longer? Is there's just such good people around it?
Yeah, I mean, the culture is different, right? And so it was a lot of high school and a lot of college kids that I, you know, was
Yeah.
working with when I was a child myself, really, at that time. But the culture just is different. And I had to dip my toes a little bit in New Orleans Saints football coverage. And we had like a little bit of like Dallas Cowboys coverage
Okay.
because of just like where we were located. And Dak Prescott played for Mississippi State, so with the Cowboys. So there was just this like Dak Prescott cult following. But so being around that a little bit, it just, it's different. The way that they're raised is different. The environment is just different. What I do miss, though, is you don't have as many rags to riches stories,
Yeah.
right? Because hockey is so expensive to play.
Yes.
A lot of these people are, hockey players are coming from assumingly some type of family established money to be able to afford to play hockey in the first place. So you don't get those like really feel good stories of Angel Reese, playing basketball for LSU. I believe she bought her mom a house or something recently,
Yeah.
right? Like you don't get
Mhm.
those stories as much anymore, or hearing from Leonard Fournette, who grew up in the lower ninth ward in New Orleans and, now he's made it. And so those kinds of stories I definitely miss. But overall, the culture is just so cool with hockey.
That's so interesting now that I think about it, because hockey, like basketball and football, are sort of flashy in a
Mhm.
way, and hockey's not at all.
Mhm.
And it's interesting that it's kind of the opposite from the way that these people have grown up.
Yep. That's it's an interesting take, and I feel like there's probably some kind of study someone could do on it, right? On the
Yeah.
way that you're raised and how it translates once you reach that level of fame, right?
Mhm.
And that level of money. And this is like a very odd comparison, but Ed Ogeron was the head football coach at LSU when they won the national championship. And I know there are a lot of people who, even though have no Louisiana ties, you probably know who Ed O is. But he kind of came from nothing, right? He came from
Yeah.
small town Louisiana and he rises to fame. And then right after they won, he gets a divorce and he loses his job. And, things just kind of start to fall apart. And I'm
Mhm.
obviously very like, this is speculating outside perspective. I don't know the man, but it feels like, oh, when you kind of come from something so small,
Yeah.
you get put on this big stage and you can't handle it.
Yeah.
Right. And I know there's been a lot of people making that take about what happened to him at LSU, and it breaks my heart a little bit for that. But yeah. Anyway, I feel like we're getting off topic. But
I know, because I have now these other questions, but I think it's for a later segment in the show. Let's look at your role this year with the Avs,
Yeah.
because it's not only expanded, but it also looks a little different from anything we've seen before. It's kind of a hybrid role. It seems like there's a lot of flexibility in what you're able to do.
Mhm.
Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, it's been really awesome. It's been a lot of fun. It's been truly an answered prayer. I've hoped for something
Yeah.
like this for a long time. And it's been such a unique opportunity, like what you've mentioned, right? To do both jobs. And to not have to worry about travel, although I would love to do that someday and, at least
Yeah.
have that experience. But to be able to do both has been fun. People have asked me like how the role's going, or how the roles are going, I should say. It's a lot easier now that I feel like I have more of a control on it. Felt like
Yeah.
I was definitely like drinking from a fire hose, or whatever that phrase is, whenever the fire hose, whenever the season started, because it just felt like information overload. And while the jobs are very similar in the sense of the topics are largely the same, right?
Yeah.
It's not, I'm doing one for the Denver Nuggets and one for the Avs, right? It's covering the Avs in both aspects, covering the same league, which is what I love about this job too, compared to local news. Is like one sport, one league,
Yeah.
one team. But it's also very different. I learned quickly, right? Like I remember for the home opener, it was my first time doing both jobs. I went from standing in VOM 2, where I normally do my Avs Insight show, did Avs Insight, and then I turned right around and I'm doing something for Altitude in their open. And just the not having the echo in the arena on the microphone really freaked me out.
Mhm.
So it's like little
Yeah.
small things like that. I go from Avs Insight where it's this they're both high energy, but it's a different type of energy, I feel like, in arena. I mean, the way I enunciate and the way I project needs to be a little bit different than just on
Yeah.
TV.
Yeah.
You're connecting with fans in a way that you're not doing on
Absolutely.
TV. And then you literally hear an echo in the bowl, right? Like you hear yourself talking. And then once I switch the microphones out and I'm going to do a similar hit on Altitude, I kind of paused because I was like, oh, wait, I can't hear myself. I was like,
Mhm.
oh, that's normal. That's normal. So just the balance of it, and trying to get a little bit better at, whatever Altitude needs me to do for their pregame show, I'll try to incorporate that into my own pregame
Yeah.
show. But it's a lot easier said than done. Sometimes
Yeah.
the topics just don't land the same. I remember there was one game where Altitude had me talking Matt Duchene trade big picture. I mean, it was just like, they
Yeah,
had this really
the
cool
trade
graphic of like,
tree.
the trade tree, right?
Mhm.
It was a great hit for Altitude. I tried to reincorporate that into Avs Insight. Did not land. My boss afterward was like, yeah, so that Matt Duchene stuff. I was like, I know. That didn't really go the way I wanted it to go in arena. Okay. So if you were there that night, so sorry about that. So kind of managing how it's similar, but it's different, right?
Yeah.
But I also love the integration of it, of being able to do the player interviews and have, that control over it, and then use those in Avs Insight too. I take a lot of pride in that. So yeah, it's been good. And I love hosting from the studio. They'll send Kyle Keefe on the road for select road trips, right? So we have one coming up this week. I'll get to do a couple more, but that's really fun because Avs Insight is not easy. I'm up there by myself and I don't have
Yeah.
anyone to banter with or to
Yeah.
talk with, or like if I make a
Jeez.
funny joke, I hope that I can hear one of 18,000 people laugh at my joke.
Collecting the homework thing when Nathan
Yes,
McKinnon's
yes.
goal, his 1,000th point, I should say.
Yes.
I thought that was funny, Rachel.
Thank
But
you.
you couldn't know that.
I know. I was like, I hope people are laughing because I don't know if people are actually hearing, and I know
Yeah.
that sometimes people, depending on where you're sitting in the arena, it just is really difficult to hear me at times too. Like my husband has given me that feedback from all the games he's had at. He's like, oh, I can hear you a lot better in this section, but if I'm sitting here, I can't hear well. And so I just hope that people can hear. So not having this as someone to banter with is difficult. And I didn't realize how difficult it was until I started hosting with Altitude, and I have an analyst with me, right? So
Yes.
instead of me just talking two goals or making a joke by myself, I have someone who's super talented and knowledgeable
Yeah.
standing right next to me that I can have that back
Yeah.
and forth which has been super fun.
Well, you also have a really hard job of keeping people interested during intermission.
I know,
feel
when they
like
wanna get
that is the
snacks,
hard
right?
right.
I
Half the
know.
people are leaving
I
or
know.
trying to figure out what to talk about, and you have to kind of fill that space. So
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the most difficult parts about it.
It's way more of an entertainment role than I ever realized what I was getting myself into in that
Yeah.
aspect, and like just trying to grasp their attention and hold on to it when I know that I am very much secondary to what's happening on the ice, right? Like
Right.
people want to use this time to go to the restroom, to go get their snacks, whatever. But the way it is kind of positioned during the time of the intermissions, there's usually a little bit going on before Avs Insight. So I always hope that like, oh, well, hopefully people can run to the restroom, whatever, and then come back and catch Avs Insight. Or, maybe you missed it first intermission, but you'll catch it second intermission.
Yeah.
And then also understanding there are like some diehard fans that tell me they watch every single show. And I love
Yeah.
that. So that's awesome too. My husband always jokes anytime he comes to the game, he's like, I can't drink any liquids because I can't go to the bathroom because I can't miss the game and I can't
showtime.
miss your show. So
That's just hard.
I love his attention to detail, from mapping
know,
out
right?
where he can hear you best and planning his drinks and meals accordingly.
You know, I
That's
actually-
adorable.
I did look at the comments of your show from This Is Fun.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody in the comments did say, I go to games to see Rachel.
That's so
I was
sweet.
like,
Someone
that
in
is
our
so
live chat said they met you
Ooh.
during the playoffs last year. Very kind person.
Ah,
oh,
Thank you. Very sweet. I do love those comments.
It is hard, like, not to have some level of care what people think when you're in this type of job, because you also want to like tune out the haters. You don't want to dwell on the criticism, but you also appreciate positive feedback, I'm sure.
The positive feedback is so sweet and so kind. And Megan and I have talked off camera about
Yes.
I have stopped Googling myself. I no longer look at like weird message groups, boards,
Yep.
whatever you want to call it.
Reddit.
Not even, yep.
Yep.
Because people are mean. And so I've just stopped, and my attitude is significantly better because of it. So that has been great. But thank you to all the people who say really nice things.
Yeah, no, it still goes a long way.
I do want to ask you about this job in particular. Not really like walking us through a game day,
Mhm.
but just talking about the stuff behind the scenes that fans wouldn't know that you're doing.
Yeah. A lot of internal communications, a lot of answering emails and just trying to stay organized. KSE is such a big company. The
Yeah.
Avs is a big organization, right? Trying to stay on top of all of our big picture elements to make sure that the stories are told in the best way possible. So I
Mhm.
work very closely with our marketing team, our youth hockey department, our community relations department, right? To just make sure that we're telling all those stories
Yeah.
as best as we possibly can, right? And
Mhm.
trying to find the stories whenever they present themselves. I was thinking of one, but I can't give it away. But little things like that of like, oh, well, hey, I think this might be a good idea. Or has anyone thought about how we can incorporate that into Avs Insight? And
Mhm.
Yeah.
truthfully, when I first took this role, I just so wanted to be taken seriously as a reporter at that point in my career. This was 6 years ago. I was still relatively young. And I still want to be taken seriously. Don't get me wrong. It's just, I felt like I was so hyper focused on like, I need to be taken seriously. I want to be buttoned up. I'm serious. I know sports. I know what I'm talking about. That the community relations stories were very secondary to me when I got here.
Yeah.
And I soon realized how important they were and why they were important. And these stories do make a difference and they do matter, right?
Yes.
Growing the game across the state of Colorado with our youth hockey department and like trying to help be the voice for them. Our community relations team does an incredible job. And this is the only professional team I've worked for, so I have nothing to compare it to.
Yeah.
But I remember before thinking, anytime I'd see one of these like fluff stories, be like, oh my gosh, they just want to like toot their own horn and like they probably don't even do anything for charity.
Performative.
Yeah. It just feels like whatever, roll my eyes at it. And now that I'm in it, and especially with the way that the Avs do it, it's so good. Like they do a great job and they mean to do well. And Deb Dowling and her team and CR just do such a fabulous job and they care so much about this, and they make a big difference in our community. And kids who are struggling in our community with like the charity brunch, I know is a big one that people know about. So I have such a level of pride that I take in telling those stories that it's been really fun.
Yeah. Deb is great. I had the pleasure of meeting her before. She was the nicest person
She's
in
amazing.
the world.
She's an angel. Yeah.
Has there been a favorite feature story that you've gotten to do?
Yes. And I wrote some notes down on that one too, because I didn't want to draw a blank. But the Nicole Hensley's day with the Walter Cup, right? I mean, that was just so special. The first ever like Walter Cup, kind of tour, if you will. So that was so fun. Kim Weiss becoming the video coach with the Colorado Eagles. That was fun. Excuse me. And then to make it a little bit more Avs specific, although those have those ties, Andrew Cogliano in his new role, right? Like getting to sit down and have a couple minutes with him, and Cogs is the best. Just to hear about that transition from player to front office role and what that looks like for him was just really special, just to kind of go from Stanley Cup champ to where he is now, that was cool.
Yeah.
I love the
That's a great one.
PWHL because we got to kind of do the same thing where she came to the studio and then we followed her around with the cup. Like we went to Little Man and she ate ice cream out of it and all that kind of stuff. And I was just thinking like, this is so crazy that I get to be here to do this.
So cool.
So it's such a fun story that she has. So I love when she comes back and you guys get to do those interviews with her because it's so fun.
And it just worked out that I got to see her at Red Rocks and not Little Man, because I wouldn't have gone to Little Man because I am team Sweet Cow.
They have such a delicious like Oreo, but they blend it first. So it's not just like a vanilla base with Oreo chunks in it. It's like a chocolatier base with Oreo.
I do know what you're talking about.
Their
It's so
coconut
good.
ice cream, it's like one that they rotate. It's just phenomenal. So,
Which one is it?
coconuts. If you like coconut, get coconuts.
This is
They don't always have
I
it.
don't like coconuts.
Oh, Rachel.
Sweet Cow, if you're watching, please let me be a sponsor.
They're
Sponsor
so
us.
underrated. Like I still like Little Man too, but
Mhm.
Sweet Cow is my main. They had a location near DU, and that was such a good spot.
It's just so good.
I worked at Sweet Cooey's, which is
Oh,
the
Broadway?
sister company to Little Man, and I have PTSD from it.
Oh no!
I
Really?
would make the waffle cones and I had burns all
no.
over my arm that never went away. I would
no.
leave smelling like sugar cones and it scarred me.
Oh my
So,
gosh.
literally.
The burns.
Physically, yeah.
Yikes!
The cones. My mother-in-law, she loves Sweet Cow too. They're in California right now. They're moving out to Colorado soon, but she's obsessed with Sweet Cow. Every time they come to visit, we
Mhm.
have to go to Sweet Cow. She bought a t-shirt there, and she always jokes like, I don't know if I should wash it because it smells like the waffle cones, and I want it to always smell that way.
Like, please wash it.
I'm sure she will. It's just so
Maybe
funny.
wash it.
That is so funny.
We are. It's like we're little ADHD children, like, distracted by the shiny object. Because now I'm gonna hard transition into.
That's okay.
Buckle in. I want you to take us along because we see the team through an even different lens despite covering them as well. I just kind of want to know, if you put us in the passenger seat of your car and took us on a ride through the season, what it would look like starting from the beginning when things didn't go so well for the Avs. They had that 0-4 start. And there were just these concerns looming around the team. Nichushkin wasn't playing. Lehkonen wasn't playing. The vibes were a little bit bad. What was it like from your perspective?
It's hard to even think that was this season,
Mhm.
right? Because it's just been so different these past couple weeks from the start of the season. So that's crazy to think about. And from my perspective, it's the start of me trying to juggle these two new jobs at once, or this one job and two jobs at once. In just at my Avs Insight role, there is no reason for me to go into the locker room post game.
Mhm.
Like there's no, I mean, sure, I can go and listen and just be present and like just be knowledgeable of what's happening, but I didn't really need that content for anything is what I
Yeah.
mean. So I didn't do that before. I'd go listen to Jared Bednar post game, but I didn't really have a reason to go in the
That
locker room
makes a lot of
post game.
sense.
With Altitude, I do need to go and get sound for their post game show. So that was really my first time going in following a loss. And then it was another loss, and it was another loss, and it was another loss.
Mhm.
And that really stinks.
Yeah.
As you know, Meghan, being in that room after, and it depends on the type of loss. I'm sure last night, a loss, a shootout on the second half of back-to-back, probably pretty okay, all
Yeah.
things
Mhm.
considered. But at that early point in the season when it was just like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Trust me, I don't want to be in there, right? I don't even know what to ask these guys. It's
this.
difficult, right? So for me, it gives me PTSD, like thinking about having to do that over and
So much
over and over
PTSD
again.
in this room right now.
So I'm just so happy that it's not like that anymore. And if
Yeah.
there is
Mhm.
an odd loss, it's not as serious, right?
Yeah.
There are still some questions that make more sense to ask in that moment that I feel
Yeah.
like are appropriate to the players and they feel comfortable answering. It's not just like huffing and puffing or eye rolling. And like, I understand the frustration in those
Yeah.
moments, don't get me wrong. But so going from that to where we are now has just been crazy. I think it does all start with the goaltending change, right? That
Yeah.
obviously rejuvenated the team in a big way.
Mhm.
And I think it gave players this kind of eye-opening experience of, wow, management believes in us enough to
Yeah.
know that maybe the skaters are not the problem and it's goaltending that could maybe need some adjusting. And so once they go out and do that, it instantly revives the room.
Mhm.
Everyone's
Right.
lively and happy, not only because the two new guys are phenomenal and they're just fun to be
Yes.
around, but I think, and this is speculative, I don't know, I would think it's the belief in management beliefs in us, right? So
Right,
just
yeah.
exciting about that move. Then you realize who these two new goaltenders are as people, and they are just a joy to be
Amazing.
around.
Yes.
So fun, right? They
Mhm.
bring so much life and energy into the room. And not only that, the initial excitement of, okay, we've made these changes. Well, let's see what can happen long term. Let's really see if these guys can get it done, if this really is going to change the outcome. And it does.
Right.
And the team has been better since getting those two new goaltenders. So that was an exciting time. And then before you know it, we're at the trade deadline, right? And the right pieces are kind of falling into place.
Mhm.
And I'm sure we're going to talk about the Rantanen trade too. But
Yeah.
do you want to go there now?
I want to, on the post game thing,
Yeah.
being in a sad locker room, seeing those sad
Ugh.
faces, I kind of wanted to talk to somebody else. Like when you see the work that they put in day and day out, it is a little hard not to take a little bit of that with you and
Yeah.
wear some of that emotion yourself.
Mhm.
And so I kind of wanted to know what that looks like for you. And then similarly, knowing what to ask in those moments.
Mhm.
Sometimes I think people will hear a question in a lost post game and wonder, why would they ask that? But there's almost a sacrificial
Yeah.
question
Mhm.
sometimes
Yeah.
that it is your job
Yeah.
to ask sometimes. And I wondered if you could relate to that too.
It's so easy to be watching from your couch or wherever you're watching from and criticize someone else's work and criticize the questions. And I get it. It sometimes, like, not all my questions are perfect. It is hard. Sometimes you're put in situations where you don't have time to formulate this picture perfect question.
Right.
Sometimes maybe you're trying to get a specific soundbite out of them and you're trying to go around it in a roundabout way to get them to talk about something.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can anticipate how the player is already going to react.
Yeah.
You kind of know after a loss how McKinnon's going to react versus another
100%.
player. So you're trying to toe that line of asking the question in a way to where they don't think it's a dumb question,
Yeah.
but you're just trying to get a certain answer out of them. It's a lot more difficult than it seems, as you know, for sure, Meghan. And I think navigating it is just showing up every day and hoping that you've built up enough of a relationship with these
Right.
players that they know your question is coming from a good place,
Mhm.
Yeah.
right? Of just being kind and soft in those moments, because I don't want you to lose. My job is way more fun when you
Yeah.
win, and I
100%.
understand that you're working really hard and I know you wanted to win and you're trying your best, but I have a job to do too. And so I just think that over the years that I've hopefully earned enough respect from the players that they at least know who I am, know that I'm just trying my best here too,
Yeah.
right? And I'm just trying to do the job that I have to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of all it is at the end of the day. And just kind of softening the blows where you can in those questions and maybe keeping them simple in those moments too. They already know
Yeah.
what they want to say after
Yeah.
a loss. So maybe it's, you know, I can't even think of it on the spot right now, but like, what was the change in this game? Or
Right.
your initial thoughts on this loss?
Mhm.
Like just keeping it simple, I feel like has
Yeah.
kind of worked the best for me at
Yeah.
least. Yeah.
No, it's tough. And from an outsider perspective, I can see that you command a lot of respect with the players on the
thanks.
team. And one of them would have been Mikko Rantanen. I think it's a shared opinion, but I certainly still want to know
Yeah.
your reaction to this loss, because from the media perspective, this was a player that was always so good to media.
Yep.
So it was a little bit of a shock just from that angle.
Yeah. It's hard. It's one of those moments I feel like you'll always remember where you were when the Rantanen
Yes,
trade
that
happened.
sounds
Right? I mean,
dramatic,
it's like
But yes.
I won't forget when that moment happened, where I was, what my reaction was. I was having dinner with friends. I was at my friend Hunter and Lindsay's house. They had made a beautiful dinner for us, and I didn't have my phone with me because I had the night off. I'm with friends, I have my phone in another room. I go to check it. I have, I don't know, 70 unread text messages. My X notifications are off the radar, and I'm like, what the heck is going on? And I'm reading them from most recent to dated.
Mhm.
And so the messages didn't make sense at first. And then I'm seeing notes about Rantanen traded, and I'm like, oh my gosh, what are these stupid trade rumors, right?
Yeah.
And then I start getting a little nervous as I'm like realizing what's happening. And I'm like, I don't know, where there's smoke, there's fire. Like, is he
That's a
really getting
lot.
traded?
Mhm.
And then I was like, oh my gosh, there it is. Like the confirmation. And I almost started crying. I mean, it was, and then I'm with two friends who are sports fans, but they were probably wondering, like, what is the big deal here? Like, oh, a trade. I'm like, you don't understand. This is Mikko Rantanen that just got traded to the Hurricanes. Like, what is happening? So yeah, I was devastated. I mean, from my personal standpoint, he's a great person to talk to after a loss.
Yes.
After a win,
safe-
after a loss, no matter what. Like, Rantanen was someone you could count on.
Yeah.
Someone that I knew once I went into that room. And also, just for those that don't understand the ins and outs of it, not everyone is available after a win or a loss either. There's only select guys that are still left in the room. And as I'm scanning the room quickly, everyone has their head down, and I try to make eye contact with someone to see if, like, are you going to let me? And Mikko was always there. Right. And he was always available, and he'd, Mikko, do you mind if I grab you? Yeah, no, let's go. And he was always happy to do it. Right. And I'm going to miss that so much. And it's a relationship that I've worked on over however many years that just disappears. And that really stinks. You don't get to like say goodbye or anything, which is hard too. It's like, oh, you were such a good coworker.
Yes.
And I don't get to like tell you bye or thank you for like all that you did for us and the media and just being so nice and willing to talk to us all the time. So that stinks. And I didn't understand what was going on from taking the personal emotion out of it, if you will. Why the heck are we getting rid of Mikko Rantanen?
Yeah.
It felt like, wow, we're really throwing in the towel on the season, aren't we? This is it. I guess I can make my summer plans, and it's going to be like that. And it didn't take long to realize, okay, they are much smarter than me. They knew exactly what they were doing in that trade and bringing in, and we'll never really know the money and what was offered and what wasn't. And that's unfortunate. And I hope, sorry, I'm going to put you guys on the spot. Do you think Rantanen will get booed on Sunday?
I think so.
Really? Okay.
And this is something I wanted to ask you too. I think right now he's getting put in a really, really bad light, especially by Avs fans.
Yeah.
And I do think that people are really upset with what he's doing, not just because he wouldn't accept the money to stay here, but because he then chose to go to Dallas, which we don't know if that's exactly what he chose, if he said that he would only go to 4 specific teams. But I do just kind of want to ask you, having been around him as much these past few years, do you think that this could possibly be true, that this is something that he would do in a malicious way?
I don't think so. I think the guy just wanted money. I think like a lot of people in the world, he just wanted to level up and make more money, which did disappoint me at first, because my little, tiny humble heart was like, why wouldn't you want to just take less money and stay in the city where your best friends are, where you won the Stanley Cup? Also, it's Denver, Colorado. It's an amazing place to live.
360 days of sunshine.
You're from Finland, like you spend your downtime in Finland, which is not a crazy expensive place to live. Like, what do you really need more money for? And this is coming from someone who does not make that level of money. And so to me, it just felt like once you reach, I don't even know what it would be, but once you reach a certain level, what does it really matter? You know? And so for me, I had a struggle with that of like, man, can't you, it felt selfish. Like, come on, Mikko. But even if it was, he has the right to do that and to try to get more money. And plenty of players are going to do that in their career. I mean, it was Taves, right? The last time they worked on his deal, he took a pay cut to stay.
Yeah.
Didn't Jonathan Duran take a pay cut to stay?
Certainly,
we'll see what happens.
Don't F with the
1 year.
happiness.
Yeah.
Don't mess with
I
happiness.
just do think that there is something to be said and about staying with your friends and your teammates and somewhere where you have something really good going. And that was really confusing and disappointing for me, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a reason to make Mikko Rantanen to be a villain.
Yeah.
I mean, because that's not what it is. And I don't think he went to Dallas with like this FU Colorado mentality.
Yeah.
I just don't think so. And so when I heard people talking about him potentially getting booed on Sunday, my initial reaction was like, come on, there is no way in heck that is going to happen. Now that I'm seeing more on social media and like more fan interaction, I'm like, oh, you might actually boo him. Okay.
I
Wow.
think we're going to get both.
Yeah.
I think that he's going to get a tribute video and they're going to celebrate and cheer when he has all of the cup moments from that 2022 season.
And then maybe when he scores a goal, he'll get booed.
Yeah.
Anytime he touches the puck
okay.
or like first shift,
Yeah.
I think there are going to be boos. I think the Matt Duchene of it all too just sort of painted this story of we're going to boo them both now together. And so I think we're going to get boos and cheers and it's going to be confusing.
Yeah. I think it's also really bad timing that they're playing Dallas right after this happens. If this was further down the season, I don't think he would get booed, but
well, it would have been in the playoffs too, right? Like, well, I guess if it weren't Dallas, maybe it would have been another team that they wouldn't have seen till next year in the regular season. But poor timing. My poor coworkers on the game presentation side for my in-arena job, they're the ones that put these videos together, right? The welcome back video. So when the trade game final, my group chat with those coworkers blowing up, like, oh my gosh, we've got to get a welcome back video done
this Sunday.
Oh, that stinks.
Oh boy.
So yeah, and just preparing for that from like a game press standpoint will be very interesting. It's also, celebrating Nathan McKinnon getting his 1,000th point pregame. It's like, oh, the timing of this really stinks, but you can't push that off anymore because by the time they get back from this road trip, he's going to have 1,015 points by then. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard.
It's really hard.
It's tough for sure. I wish him the best of luck. I do not think he's a malicious person in all of this.
Either.
I think he's probably having a hard time with the decision, to be honest. I don't know. You see so many different takes online that if he should be mad at anyone or if we should be mad at anyone, it's his agent, right? Because it just feels like maybe things weren't totally crystal clear from that standpoint of what offers were made. And oh, how I wish I could be fly on the wall and just really know what was actually offered and what was actually discussed. But I mean, going back to it all, where we kind of started in this conversation, boy, did management know what they were doing. Yeah. Right? They knew exactly what they were getting in Martin Necas and putting him by Nathan McKinnon and hoping for the best, right? And Jack Drury, why is his name so hard for me to say?
No, I understand it.
Jack Drury. It always, I feel like I'm drunk every time I say it. Jack Drury.
If he had like a 2-syllable first name, would it be easier?
Yes.
Maybe?
Jacob Drury. Like it would be a lot. Yeah, it's something about the 2-syllable thing. So Drury,
JD.
Yeah, there we go. JD. New nickname. You're welcome. He's a fourth line guy. And he's done well in that role. And I think it helps that he's a great interview. That's what I'm always worried about, right? When we trade for players, like, oh, what are they going to like to interview?
Pipeline guys.
Yeah.
So like they're media trained, you can tell.
Yes.
But they're thoughtful.
They're very thoughtful and just so friendly. And he has the fun connection with his uncle playing for the Avs, right? When they won the cup. And so overall, a very good trade that has really
hindsight.
Even though it was very scary at first.
It was scary. Chloe, where were you?
I was sick. That's when I was really sick and I was laying in bed.
Girl while she was down.
Yeah, it was like 8 p.m. on a Friday, and it was like the first time I had stood up in like 3 days. It's like, oh my god, there's no way that this is happening.
Did you just
right
fall
now.
to your knees in the club like Eric
Basically,
Johnson?
yeah.
And even like I'm thinking of so every year we put together a look and feel, which is from, it's the look and feel. I don't know, like my cue cards have the look and feel on it, right? You probably see it on broadcasts and just all throughout the arena and stuff. This year it had players' names on it, right? Like Nate Dogg. It had, does it just say Cale Makar? I forget what it says, but like little nicknames throughout. And it had the Moose is Loose on it. Oh my gosh. The headache it caused for so many people to work so hard to get that removed from every video, every slate, every graphic, every. I mean, it was
that with like the pregame video. I mean, not only do they have to remove so many people, but they have to, set up these shoots to take that video of all the new players by the time that
it's a whole thing. Getting players in for headshots. Yeah. It's a lot of work that I don't have a whole lot to do with, and I'm very appreciative that my coworkers handle it with such grace, because they do a great job. But yeah, it's a lot of doing that people don't realize with trades and getting new players in and taking others off of your look and feel.
I think that's interesting too, because it's probably been different for you having to do all these get to know, meet the new players. So I'm sure that's been fun to get an inside look.
Those are fun.
Some of them.
Yeah, those are fun because it's like, okay, what are we getting here? And for the get to know Necas and Drury, instantly we were interviewing Necas first, and I was off to the side, and unprompted, Jack stood up and shook my hand. He's like, "Hey, I'm Jack. What's your name?" "Rachel." "Oh, cool. Where are you from? How long you been here?" And like, he's just asking these questions and he's curious. And then he did it to our videographer that was working there at the time, and did it to another photographer that was there. And I was like, that's just cool to see. Right. So it's like, okay, we're getting a good guy,
That's a nice touch.
And Necas is great too. His English isn't like right up there. And so I think he was a little, I don't know, more reserved because of that, but also super fun to get to know both of them. And
I love to hear that.
If you that TikTok trend where it's the social people asking the players what their name is.
Admins names.
If you asked Jack Drury that, he would definitely know what your name is. You can just you haven't seen that?
No. It's gonna pop up now. My phone's on do not disturb over there, but I know it's listening.
It's listening.
That's gonna be your next TikTok. You're gonna see it
later. It's a little sad because it's like the social media admins asking the players, do you know our names? And different teams, different leagues are doing it, and a lot of the players don't know the names, but a lot do too. And so you're like, okay, they were raised well, they have good manners. So it's very revealing.
And at least like at KSE, you wear the badges that have your name on it, right? Although they've changed the badges over the year. Like when I started, they were this big, they were huge, and now they're really tiny. And so I'm always like, trying to squint to see people's names that I'm not familiar with. But
all right, so we're gonna go inside trade deadline day, mainly because you worked it on your birthday, and I just want people to know how hard Rachel works. I hope that you found a way to celebrate too when it was all said and done, but you put on your work boots early in the morning, and the Avs didn't stop with Necas and Drury, so stuff kept happening.
It was so fun. I turned 31. I feel like at some point the birthdays are just like whatever, and my birthday is always around trade deadline. It's always in the middle of some crazy 6-7 game homestand. There's always a lot going on. My husband's birthday is the same week too, so we just typically have a lot going on, and we just kind of decided, we'll find a time to celebrate birthday. It's fine. Okay. It's fine. And it actually worked out really well, because if you're going to work on your birthday, that was a really fun day to work on my birthday, right? That was
probably exciting.
I took a workout in the morning. I was like watching all this news come in, and luckily I'm in a position where I don't have to break news anymore, right? Like I should stay on top of things and be informative and stuff, but it's not really my job to break news or follow the rumors or anything. So I can relax a little bit in that sense, which is really nice. But it was just like a rush, right? Every time you see like the things pop up of all these rumors, like, oh, is this going to be true? This is exciting. And like trying to Google the new player and learn a little bit more about them. And I went to Starbucks, got my free birthday Starbucks, went to the practice rink. I was just like, this is so fun. Everyone's there. So it was really exciting. And I think the best part was I was in the room still talking with Scott Wedgwood about the trade. So I'm bopping around to a bunch of different players, just getting different sound for altitude and for myself, like trying to repurpose things. And in the middle of talking to Scott Wedgwood, they had the TV on in the room, NHL Network, and they had the ticker running at the bottom, Eric Johnson, to Colorado from Philly. And it's like, well, is it real if it's on NHL Network? I'm like, I don't know. Would they put it up there if it's not real? This is so exciting, because we were kind of hearing the rumblings of that before, right? And with Devon Taves making his like condor signal, it's like you want to believe it's real, but I'm always just like, until it's actually real from their official account,
Yeah.
I'm not trusting it. I
Yeah.
don't want to, get my hopes up if that's not real. So that was just really exciting and super fun to, kind of manage everything. But it's always really weird because you miss guys that get traded too.
Yeah.
I mean, Giovanni Smith, I didn't get to know hardly at all, to be
Yeah.
honest. But Casey Middlestat is someone I've,
really nice in the room.
talked to a lot over the last year or less than a year, I guess, a little shy of a year. But, and he was always willing to do an interview, win or loss. He was one of
Yes.
those guys
He
who would
was.
always do it and always be kind about it. And that stinks, don't get to tell him bye. So I asked Scott, I was like, if you see Casey Middlestat, or can you just tell him I said thanks for always being so nice? I mean, this is so weird. I mean, you
Yeah.
could see them, I guess, when they return, but it's rare for me to go into an
talk to
opposing
them.
team room and talk to them.
Absolutely.
So that's hard, but it was so cool to hear that EJ was coming back though. Fan favorite, media
Yeah.
favorite,
Yeah.
he's just fantastic. So super exciting. And then trying to figure out, okay, new room, new names, new faces, new
Yeah.
personalities. What are we getting
Yes.
here? Of just kind of trying to understand each guy individually of how I can manage interviewing them and what type of interview am I going to get from them. And first impressions are crazy, right?
Yeah.
You can learn a
Yeah.
lot about someone in a first impression. And I felt
Absolutely.
like we learned a lot about those new players really quickly. I feel like,
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, we even kind of glossed over the New York trades, but Lindgren and VC also joined the room. And so
Yeah.
I
Oh my
feel
gosh.
like I'm catching up.
Oh.
We got a super chat. Let's see. Vaguely sober. Will the tribute video just be Mikko falling down?
No.
I don't think so.
He was
I
he was
hope
a
not.
slippery little moose. He'd fall a lot.
Slippery little moose. That's funny.
It's maybe an homage to at least one moose fall.
Yeah.
That's funny.
All I see on Twitter is that Charlie Coyle is a great guy in the room. From Alyssa, so far, first impression, absolutely
10 out of 10 guy. I mean, I interviewed him post game after his first game, and I didn't even hear his response to the first couple of questions because I was just like, he's so happy.
Yeah.
And he's so smiley and
Yeah.
kind.
And
And
you could tell it was shocking, but he was so happy.
yeah, and it was one of those awkward moments, as you know, Megan, when you walk up to a player after they've already answered questions to someone else. I'm like, shoot, I missed that because I was at another player.
Yes.
I'm like, hey, sorry to make you do that again. He's like, don't apologize. I'm like, oh, okay. I just think that don't apologize statement is
Yeah.
just so strong.
That is powerful.
And he just did it with a smile on his face. He's like, yeah, what you got for me? And I was like, wow, that is so nice and
we need
encouraging.
more players from Boston because whatever they're doing with their media over there probably makes us look like angels.
Yeah,
Because
seriously.
Drury, coming from Montreal market,
Mhm.
he's so kind in interviews
Drury's the
too.
best. Yeah, he's
We
the
need
best.
the guys from the tough market, so they're like, oh, this is really nice here.
That's true. Yeah, we're pretty soft compared to
Yeah, we're really
compared
nice.
to Boston,
They're
Montreal.
just,
Yeah.
they're just happy to
On
be here.
the other side of this, do you kind of have a strategy of how you give off a first impression to kind of help these new players trust you a little
Yeah.
bit more?
I do think first impressions are important from both ends. I do wonder sometimes, is this person going to remember who I It's going to take a couple tries
Yeah,
before they
yeah.
remember me, or I can earn that respect, right? It's going to take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
I can't remember whose scrum it was in, right? Too. And then when you're in a scrum, it's like you don't even get to introduce yourself. And so
Oh, yeah. It's
and I
hard.
don't think they're going to remember oh, that reporter asked a good question. I think it's built over time more
Yes.
than anything.
Yeah.
But I do think it's nice to go out of your way to go shake a person's hand and introduce yourself. And whether they remember that or not, whether they remember your name or your affiliate organization, hopefully they'll at least remember your face of
Yeah.
oh
Right.
yeah, that person took the time to come introduce themselves. Maybe I also recognize it's tough being the new person. I even remember starting out with KSE as a new person
Yeah.
and meeting all the new people and the amount of people I introduced myself to multiple times, right? And that cringy moment of we've
Yeah.
already met. And you're like, oh, shoot, right? I recognize it's difficult. And I can't imagine stepping into their role, coming into a new team. There are so many different things happening around you. The last thing they care about is a reporter's name or who they work for. So I think it's
Yeah.
just built over time for sure.
Okay, if you had to grade the trade deadline, what would you give it?
I think, are we talking A, B, C, D?
Unless you have a different
A different scale.
scale.
Yeah.
Pass, fail.
Good or bad. Yeah. Pass, fail, pass for sure. I am maybe overconfident here. A-. Only because I feel
what you think?
That's
an
exactly
A+
what I gave it.
is one of those things that maybe doesn't exist, or I don't know. I don't even know what would have made it an A+.
Mhm.
Maybe if we had kept Mikko, but then still got the depth scoring and the goaltending somehow.
Yeah.
But I also recognize that that probably wasn't possible, given maybe it was Mikko taking a bigger pay cut to stay, and then we still got the depth pieces that would make it an A+.
Yeah.
So instead it's an A-, which I think is still pretty dang good.
Really good.
And I went from, when we were talking about the ups and downs of the seasons, I mean, it was just a few weeks ago, my sister's texting me, hey, can I come visit? She's in Louisiana. Can I come visit like mid-late May? Like, you know what? I think you can.
Yeah.
Because I'm not super confident in where the team's at right now. And I don't like planning things without knowing what's going to happen in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I was like, you can come. I think it'll be all right. I'm canceling everything.
Yeah.
I think that this is going to be a very, very fun postseason. And I feel very confident about what the team has done. So I think it's a really exciting time to follow the Avalanche.
No, I agree. I don't think
agree
it's
too.
too bold.
Mhm.
I think that this team, as constructed, can compete seriously for a
Mhm.
Stanley Cup. And I think the minus maybe is that, though out of their control in a lot of ways, it did need some retooling. So I think the fact that there were some areas of vulnerability that needed to be addressed is where maybe there's a small little minus, but they addressed them very aggressively every step of the way, going back to the goaltending. So that's an A grade in my book as well.
Now it's a matter of, what will Val Nichushkin look like in the postseason, and how reliable is
Yeah.
that going to be?
Yeah, it's a
Because
fair
if something were
question.
to happen again, whether that's something not hockey related, or if it's an injury, then you're feeling maybe we should have fixed this issue. And that's going to really stink.
Yeah.
I'm cautiously optimistic that things will be okay this time around. I have a hard time believing that the team would allow him to come back after this many times if they didn't believe that things were going to be okay.
Right.
But who the heck knows?
Yeah.
But we've seen and heard from players about how much of a difference it makes when he's on the ice.
Yeah.
And you can't deny
You
that.
can see it.
And so just hoping everything will be okay with that, because
It's a huge
that'll make a big
piece.
difference. Yep.
I'm optimistic about it too. I completely agree with that. I don't think they would bring him back thinking that something like that would happen again.
Right.
And if it does, then that's just something that you have to deal with.
Yep.
Especially in the playoffs. But at least
That's
then they
life.
know for next time.
Yep.
All right. Let's begin winding it down, because it is nearing an hour. You've been so generous with your
Oh my gosh,
time
Chris, you'll be
today.
here all day.
Just some personal reflections and some fun questions. I wanted to know about how you tackle imposter syndrome, if it's something that you deal with. I know it is something that I personally deal with. And since you guys are back on TV this year, you've got a lot of more eyeballs on the work that you're doing. And I just wondered if that heightened maybe feelings of insecurity at time.
I think everyone deals with that to some degree, right? I think I've gotten a lot more comfortable over the years,
Yeah.
not only with just the hockey knowledge, but my on-air presence.
Yes.
I don't believe in the phrase fake it till you make it. I think that is absolutely terrible advice, and no one should ever lean on that. But there is something about approaching something with confidence, right?
Yeah.
But it's that preparation that allows you to be confident in those moments.
Totally.
And I think with my years of experience now, covering hockey, covering the Avalanche, I have a level of confidence that I didn't have last year, that I didn't have the year before, and I definitely didn't have in my first season, right? And so that first season, there was definitely some imposter syndrome for sure, of like, oh my gosh, what am I doing here? Like, this is very scary, and I don't have experience doing this, and it was tough. And so that feeling is not there anymore. I know that I deserve to be here, and I've worked to be here. And then with just like more eyeballs on TV, that doesn't really add much to it. Honestly, it just makes things more exciting.
Good.
Of like, more people are watching. This is so fun. And fans are getting to watch their teams again. And this is
Yeah.
really fun. And they have opportunities. And I know things are not perfect. The app still has some tweaks they need to work through. I know Comcast had an issue the other night. People couldn't watch Nate get to 1,000 points, and that stinks. But there are at least options now, and it's not like totally blacked out. And so
Yeah,
that's really
that's a good
exciting.
step.
And like, TV is my background, and that's what I studied in school. That's what I interned with. That's what my first job was. And again, although it's very similar to in arena, it is so different, and I've missed it so much. And it's so
Yeah.
fun. And the people I get to work with on both sides are so much fun. And the TV side, I mean, my goodness, right? With all of those goofballs, and they make work so fun on air and then behind the scenes. And it's been great. So yeah, imposter syndrome's definitely there, but being comfortable and having people around me support me in a way to make me feel even more comfortable and more
Yeah.
prepared has
Mhm.
been really cool too, right?
That's
of running
awesome.
ideas by coworkers that I trust of, hey, what do you think about if I said something this way? And knowing myself well enough to run things by people. I'm like trying to think of a good example that I had recently of, hey, what do you think about me asking about this in this situation? And
Yeah.
they're like, I don't love that. What if we approached it maybe this way? Or
Yeah.
I don't know, just trusting the people that I work with and them
Mhm.
trusting me to be able to have those conversations has been really cool and to help me feel more comfortable and confident in those moments. And I've been working too on just like on camera presence and delivery in those moments too. And a piece of advice I got was to practice at home. Now I'm forgetting what it was. It was professionals practice at home, amateurs practice live.
Interesting.
And so those reps are important. Every time you get in front of a camera, every time you see the red light come on, every time you're live, definitely helps to build you up to just become more experienced and more of a professional in those manners. But practicing at home really helps too.
Yeah.
So that's been something I've been kind of like leaning into a little bit.
I like that. Like,
Yeah.
do you look in a mirror and kind of speak as if you were on camera?
So I've done that before. Also, I'll watch a broadcast. Football is probably
Okay,
more
that's
common.
good.
And anytime a reporter is about to come on to do an interview, and even if I'm not in the room but my husband's watching, he knows like to pause it because I want to hear the question from the reporter.
Yeah.
And I'll listen to how they ask it, their inflections on words, and think about why they asked it that way.
Yeah.
And then also challenging myself to think, what's a follow-up question that could have maybe been asked there?
Mhm.
Because you also never know in those situations how many questions you're going to get. It's
Mhm.
very dependent on the time that we have in the broadcast,
Yeah.
what the producer's looking for, and how long of a response you get from the subject, right? Arturi Lekkonen, you're going to get to fit in a lot more questions than you can with like a Josh Manson or someone who
100%.
speaks a little bit more. So thinking of like those follow-up questions, that's something I've worked on very recently, and it just helps me approach things differently, which just gives me another level of confidence in those moments. So
That's
I
really helpful.
never even think about the inflection of your words.
I'm working on that too.
That's-
And like
yeah.
pausing at certain
Yeah.
points, and there's always room for improvement, always room
Mhm.
for growth, and trying to not like be satisfied and like always trying to
Mhm.
get a little bit better.
Growing.
Such
Yeah,
small things
growing.
that make a huge
Yeah,
difference when you really look back at it.
Yeah, I actually had oh shoot, who was just in the building? It was ESPN, I believe, last week. What game was that?
Oh yeah, there was Leah Hextall
And Leah was there.
AJ Maleska.
Yes, it was Leah was there, and she was in the hallway, and she's always been so kind to me. And she came up to me to offer me a piece of advice. She's like, I was watching your interview with Connor McGahey pregame. She's like, I noticed that you moved your arm across the screen. Don't do that. Like, use your inner arm and just go like this. I'm like,
Wow,
that is such good advice.
Yeah, that is really good.
That no
advice.
one teaches
Opens
you.
Your body language.
No one teaches you.
Yeah.
Okay. To be clear, I studied broadcast journalism in school. Nobody taught me how to hold a microphone. Nobody taught me what to wear. Nobody taught me how to do my makeup. No one taught me how
Yes.
to ask a question to a player at an intermission. And you just kind of learn those things along the way, right? And you have to
Yeah.
be a little bit responsible on your part to just get better at it. So,
Absorb.
yep.
Grow.
Be a sponge. Yep. Absorb.
Going off of that, you mentioning Leah Hextall, another big woman in sports. Just could you tell us about sort of some of the challenges you've had specifically as a woman in sports media?
Yeah. They're endless. It's difficult. It's always going to feel like the world's against you in a way. There are some battles that are not worth fighting, which is very frustrating of, you can't change people's minds on things, which is drives me nuts. But, and I've said this before, the way that I'm treated here is significantly better than the way that I was treated in my first job.
Yeah.
And it's not about the station that I was at or the state that I was in or the people I was around. I think it's a little bit of everything. I was covering high school and college versus professional. There was no hockey. We're talking about like the culture of things, right? I just feel, I don't know. I just feel that in the role that I'm in now, there's less doubt from people. I felt like I constantly had to prove myself earlier on in my career. I remember being at a high school basketball game and some grandpa came up to me. He's like, my wife and I love watching you on Channel 3. I'm like, that's so sweet. Thanks. Like, I'm so happy for the compliment. He's like, yeah, you really act like you know what you're talking about. Like, oh my gosh, that is so insulting. And just understanding that I'm in middle of nowhere, Mississippi. And he really thought that was appropriate to say in front of me. And
Crazy.
just other comments that like I can't even bring up of things that have been said to me at high school football practices.
Oh my goodness.
And things like that just don't happen here. I have had such a positive experience. And again, maybe it's a professional sports environment.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the hockey culture, and maybe it's Denver, Colorado too. I think it's probably a mixture of all those things. I do think the Avs have done a great job of putting women in powerful positions, that when you see a woman walk into a room to do her job, it's not alarming or concerning. It's like, we have plenty of women that work here and, do important jobs. So that definitely helps. But being a woman in sports is definitely difficult.
I don't have my computer open. Who do we have a super chat from?
Vaguely sober.
Thank you, ladies. Appreciate you.
Thank you, Vaguely.
Can you read that for us?
I have it on my computer.
Oh my gosh.
So I try squinting at that, and if I can't read it, then I look at it.
I'm like, man, I just got new contacts. I cannot see that far. That's funny. Oh man. I always tell people too, because I have a lot of young girls, women that reach out that want to do work in sports media, and I always ask for advice. I'm like, I have so much advice I could give you, but for women, I always say to hold people accountable. There were instances when I was young in my career in the South where I would let things slide because I just thought that's part of the job and I'm going to have to just deal with it.
Yeah.
And that is not true. And that is not fair. And I think I'm very much a confrontational hothead. And so instead of just like going off on someone, have something like witty in your back pocket to call people out on. I wish I had done that in a couple instances of saying something like, wow, it's interesting you feel comfortable saying that in front of me.
What an odd thing to say.
Or, what an odd thing to say.
Yeah.
Do you want to repeat that? Things like that instead of just taking it. I think that helps to at least change the narrative and hold people accountable for what they're saying and have them like really think about what it is that they're saying to you. But yeah, women rule. You ladies are awesome.
True.
And it's so fun having women around the room, right?
Yes,
Because it's such a male-dominated
huge.
field to begin with. It's nice to walk in and see other women, and representation matters, and that's really important. So
Not to go off on a super tangent, but Linus Ullmark did an interview the other day.
saw that.
And he just had such a tactful way of letting the etiquette of that interview flow to where happened to be a woman. A woman was trying to ask a question now a couple times, got interrupted by the same person who'd already asked a question. And so he just said no and moved back to the woman who'd been trying to ask her a question. And there are good men in the media room, in the Avs room, that I wanted to shout out that are usually hyper aware of this too. So whether it's the player redirecting when they notice that I'm getting cut off, but Evan has always been really good about this. Ryan Boulding, Corey, they've been excellent. So when I talked about it on Twitter, I just wanted people to know it's not always just the players who are hyper aware of this. I think it starts with accountability too. And whether it's a player using their platform to help the flow of the interview be a little bit more equitable, it goes a long way. And for me personally, it's a matter of speaking up a lot of the time too.
Getting that volume a little up.
Yeah, getting that volume a little up.
It's hard though, and it's it can be difficult and frustrating when you've tried multiple times and you feel like you're still getting stepped on. It's like, well, and then they already answer your question, right? And so then
I would have asked it better.
It'll finally come back to you, and you're like, well, they already answered, so I don't need to ask it twice. But it's a little bit nicer when it's in more conference style, like at the podium, right? Because Brendan from PR will be there to at least play traffic cop in those situations. It's like, no, it's gonna be Meghan, then Rachel, then whoever. You know, like let's keep this moving along. They've been trying, so that definitely helps. But another thing of like comparing hockey to other sports, the scrums are a lot smaller. That's a perk.
Yeah, good point.
Because it's covered less, which is unfortunate. But there was a time covering the NFC Championship game in New Orleans. I forget who. I think they were playing the Vikings and they lost. It's like the Nolan no call was anyway. It was really fun, but I went into the Saints locker room post game, and this was when I was my own camera person and everything. So I'm holding the camera, I have the mic out like this, and I had to stand on a chair on my tiptoes, and I had the microphone like upside down on the person because there were so many reporters and media. I mean, it was just insane. So that's a perk that at least there's less people to battle with.
Less people to battle with is real.
I'd like get down on the floor and like crawl through.
It's ridiculous.
I've been hit in Stanley Cup playoff, like some of those scrums get kind of
because they do get big for that.
They,
for sure.
yeah, people start shoving. You gotta start throwing
Well,
elbows.
and at least hockey players are like
Start punching
respectful enough
people.
to like be dressed.
Yeah.
You don't have that in football.
I didn't think about that because this is the only world I know. So
And it's so funny. And most of the players be like, "Oh, hang on, I gotta go put a shirt on." You know, like they're
Yes.
even like, "We gotta go put a shirt on."
Yeah.
You know? So they're like very respectful in that manner,
Yes.
which is nice.
so people don't know there are 2 dressing rooms, so they
Mhm.
never fully undress around hockey, around NHL. And they have,
But
the
they do it in
second
other
dressing room.
sports, in case you were wondering, and it's extremely uncomfortable. And I cannot believe it still happens that way in the year 2025.
Yeah, I if I was a player, I'd want a second dressing
It's
room.
so
for a little bit
stupid.
more privacy. Anyways,
Yeah.
Yeah.
this is like Sweet Cow all over
Yeah,
again. I love
Go
it
get
so
your
much.
coconuts from Sweet Cow now, everyone.
Yeah. Okay, are you ready for your last question?
Oh yes.
Okay, if you were Gary Bettman for a day, what rule would you change?
That's easy because it's very timely from last night. No shootouts. No shootouts. You
Love
just
it.
play overtime hockey until someone scores.
Until
I don't care if
someone
it takes 5
scores.
hours.
Yep.
You keep going until
Mhm.
someone scores. We saw that on display last night with, what happened with the Avs. Second half of a back-to-back. Still happy they got a point.
Yeah.
And we were chatting a little bit off camera before we got started here, but in that moment, let's say it happens again. We know that Mackenzie Blackwood does not like shutouts.
Mhm.
He has said that before. We've seen that perhaps it's maybe not a space that he's super comfortable in or can perform his best in. Would you try to just put in Scott Wedgwood in that moment? And then my other question was, with the rule change this year,
Mhm.
I believe it was this year. Did we figure that out? Was it this year or last
I
year?
didn't
For
look
sure.
it up.
Where the
this year.
goaltender gets time to warm up
Yes.
before taking actual game action.
5 minutes.
Would they have the time to do that in a shootout situation? I'm just raising these questions because I don't know.
I
Maybe
think
that's
they're
something
good
you
questions
consider.
because I feel like they would say no. That'll disrupt the flow of just going from OT.
Yeah, because they want to get it done. I mean,
Shootout.
that's why they have a shootout, right? It's to just
But-
like, okay, let's end this.
But I
It's
like
going
it from a
nowhere.
strategy perspective.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
do
frustrating
too.
because it just felt like the Wild didn't want to play overtime.
No,
They just wanted to get to a
Yeah,
shootout. And I was
and
hardly
keep
even
away.
watching the game and I could pick
Mhm.
that up. I'm like, okay, this is,
You
they
can
just
tell.
want to get to a shootout at this point, which is annoying.
it was so clear. Yeah,
Yeah.
From
that
what
was
I'm
frustrating.
sorry. From what I'm seeing, it says there's no dedicated NHL shootout warm up for goaltenders.
Okay. See, then that would be difficult because you can't just expect
Yeah, you
any
go in
goaltender to come up
real cold.
off the bench cold and like go into a shootout scenario. But-
But maybe when they know it's going to overtime,
Then
they
that's
just start warming up.
exactly.
That's a good point.
hmm
Let us in, Gary. We have some
Let's
ideas.
ponder.
my other one, my first one was that I think that like first overall draft picks should get to choose what team they go to.
Wow.
I've evolved now.
I've evolved.
I think mine would be either I don't know, not necessarily getting rid of it, but goaltender interference. It needs to be changed.
Yeah. And it needs to be more obvious and clear cut.
Exactly.
And I've heard Jesse talk about this too,
Mhm.
but having NHL officials available to answer questions after games
Yes.
would be so beneficial,
Mhm.
right? Let's
Yeah.
just try to understand what the heck is going on here. Also, with like Ross Colton was credited an assist last night. That means it would have touched his hand, right? So then
Did he get the assist?
Interesting.
I don't have my phone to double check. I
know.
thought he
That's
did, but-
crazy. I mean,
That one I'll
unless
have to look.
So is it because they were considering it a deflection and not a
it
hand
had
pass?
not a hand pass. Yeah, it must be then the distinction between the two.
So that's got to be it. But I'd love some clarity, just
yeah,
so I
now
can
I'm
learn.
confused because I
And
thought it didn't touch him in the end. I thought it.
I
Went
thought
kinda
that's
went
why it
right
was
through
ruled
his hand.
a goal because it didn't touch him. So
Somebody said if the linesman throws more than one player out of the faceoff, he gets fined.
I kind of like that too.
That's great.
That's
Love
good.
it.
Yeah, you just need.
Which is
Deal
funny
with
too because
it.
the players
Yeah,
are like, I don't
dig
know.
in.
I don't know why I got thrown out.
I don't know.
I can't
I
answer
don't
that
know
question.
why Nazem Kadri
Right.
gets thrown out every time
They just don't
It's-
like him.
so freaking
Mhm,
often.
mhm.
And Scott Wedgwood keeps getting hit all the time.
Yeah.
No
Poor guy.
goaltender interference.
Exactly.
I'd rather just err on the side of caution and be consistent then in calling it
Exactly.
kind of all
Yeah.
the time.
And that's what he said post game after he made the incredible save from his back and
his
kicked
little-
it up. It's like,
in my
oh
head,
gosh.
his toe was pointed.
It just ballerina move, right? Unbelievable. But he was just like, yeah, I mean, you have to play until the whistle, and you have to play
whistle.
as if nothing's going to get called. And
Yeah.
that's just what I was doing in that moment.
Well, it
So,
stinks. Okay, maybe
yeah.
it should be called. Like this man came
Should
out
be.
of the Four Nations break and got hit below the belt, and it's just been like very traumatic for him. I think he needs a break on the ice.
poor guy.
Okay.
I agree.
He did talk about post game too, about how he changed up his gear and how that's been really helping him, which I thought was so fascinating.
That's interesting.
That
Like
is
went into
really-
depth about how he like cut certain parts of his chest protector. I don't know. I just thought it was
Wait,
cool. It's like,
that's a-
wow, that's. He's like, yeah, it just helps me like move better.
more mobile. Okay.
Maybe just get rid of all the padding.
Whoa.
Yeah, really risk
Go
it.
out there
Risk
with
it
zero
all.
padding.
He's
at all.
so high risk. No. that's so funny. They've been great ads though. The
They're so
goalies
fun.
Have been so good to talk to.
Yeah, they're both so great, and they both care, and they're just fun to be around. I was having a conversation with Donnie, the equipment manager, because we realized we had this funny connection with the state of Mississippi after he was congratulated on working his, I forget the number, some very impressive number.
Yeah.
And he mentioned, he had worked in Mississippi. Anyway, so we were chatting and I was talking to Donnie. I was like, yeah, when I went to LSU and Blackwood was near us, was not eavesdropping, but, could hear part of the conversation. He's like, wait, you went to LSU? That's so cool. Like, that's so cool. I'm just like, oh, that's awesome. I'm glad you think that's cool because I
I'm
think it's
glad
cool.
you think that's
But
cool.
he's just, they're just fun and we'll just be
Mhm.
part of normal conversations like that is just what I'm getting at. And yeah, Scott's great too and just lively and funny and
Yeah.
a joy to be around.
Mhm.
I think he gets his feelings hurt when we don't interview him.
I think
But-
you're right.
But yeah,
No, I
they're
think
both
you're
great.
right.
He is fantastic. I do love him.
All right. That will do it for today. Rachel,
Okay.
thank you so much for being so generous with
Oh
your
my gosh,
time.
of course. This was so fun.
I'm
and-
glad we could catch up with you in this new role too. It's been almost 2 years we figured out since this is fun.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
with
since it's
Jesse
kinda come-
Montano.
Yeah.
So we are so glad you could come back down and talk with us.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Thanks for watching. Hopefully, everybody can watch Altitude, whether it's Altitude Plus or Comcast or however it is you're watching. But appreciate all the viewers and support and stuff. And yeah, I love this job, and I'm so thankful, and I recognize how special it is to have it. So always appreciative to talk about it. And
Well, you're crushing it this year.
Thanks.
So hopefully the rest of the way it just gets more exciting.
yeah,
Yeah, good luck on Sunday.
Good luck on
Thanks.
Sunday.
I know, yeah. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, we'll have a little recap maybe after.
yeah,
Live viewing.
Yeah.
All right, you
don't blow 'em too
guys.
hard, y'all. Don't blow 'em.
We'll catch you next time. Bye.
Oh, this camera.
I don't know which.
I was looking at the wrong one.
I just I